Welcome everyone back to the Pathways to Success podcast. I am very excited about the guest we have on the show today, and it is Becky Halstead, who is a retired Brigadier General and founder of STEADFAST Leadership. Becky was the first female graduate of West Point to be promoted to General Officer in 2004. She served and commanded in combat as the first female commanding general at the strategic level of leadership in Iraq, leading 20,000 soldiers and 5,000 civilians from 2005 to 2006, which is actually a first for the Army and our nation. In 2007, she received the National Women's History Project Award for Generations of Women Moving History Forward. And today she specializes in motivational speaking, developing leadership programs, as well as coaching and mentoring. Becky, I am honored to have you on the podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm thrilled to be here to speak with you this morning, especially during this kind of chaotic time.
I know. So how are things going for you in the world of what you do amidst everything that's going on?
Well, the world's changing a little bit, a lot more virtual activity, right? We're just discussing how the fact that, instead of being able to go to a conference and be a keynote speaker and have a large audience and feel the energy and, watch the faces and expressions, I'm now doing that on my computer. Still have the ability to have a large audience. I just can't see them. Yes. So in some ways it ties in nicely to what I teach, which is the first person you have to lead is yourself. So I shouldn't have to depend on the audience to deliver these messages. It's nicer to be able to see them, but in reality, if I'm leading myself through that, then I need to depend on, the depth and the value of the conversation to keep carrying it. So yes. It's interesting. On a personal level, like everybody else, I have a new saying, I'm safe at home, not stuck at home, right? To try to make it a more positive experience. But I do feel very blessed. I live in Washington State and things are going fine. And I live in the country, so I can go outside and, I'm not in the city. And so, but first and foremost, your heart just goes out to so many people and so many organizations and so many families that are really, their lives have been upheaved, right? And significant changes ahead. Yeah. We're already in it, right? So.
Yeah. Well, Becky, that's exactly why I wanted to have you on the podcast, because as you know, I've rededicated the podcast to helping really inspire the entrepreneurial spirit in the country. More than ever, do we need ideas and solutions to help innovate and push us forward. So that's why I was really excited to have you here on the show. So obviously, the things that you've done in your career are absolutely incredible. So I guess I want to start with a little bit of a genesis story. What was your life growing up that led you on this path? Where do you start with that?
Right. Well, candidly, my life was quiet and it was comfortable. And I lived in a town with no traffic lights in upstate New York, dairy farmers. My dad was an IBM engineer. My mom was a dental hygienist. I kind of had a vision for my life, which was I was going to live in the gym. I was going to be a physical education teacher, and I was going to coach women's sports. Mm-hmm. And I had a pretty good vision for my life until in our own country, they started, the president approved opening up all the military academies to women. And that was in 1976. And I was a junior in high school. And when that happened, my mother was reading about it in the newspaper. And she says, "This sounds just like you." And I'm like, I look around the room and there's no other you in the room but me. And I'm like, "What do you mean me? I want to be a coach. I know nothing about the military." But my mom, I kind of call her the Renaissance mom. I mean, she was a dental hygienist, but she saw potential in her children, and she was always reading, and she wanted to inspire us, right, and ignite in us to find our true meaning. And she says, I think this sounds like you. I mean, listen to this. They're looking for disciplined kids, well-rounded kids, involved in the community, the church, and the school, get good grades, athlete. And so I said, okay, well, if you really believe in that, I'll try. And so I started through the process, being nominated and accepted by West Point. I looked at all the academies, but after looking at all the academies, I really wanted the Army and I really wanted West Point. I'm very sentimental. I'm very traditional. And so I love the history of West Point. And I also knew that it was so hard that it was either going to make me or break me, right? Like I remember going to the Annapolis, and I could hear, I was at the Naval Academy, but just across the stone fence, I could hear all the activity of the, you know, like the real people. And I thought, I'll be jumping over that fence if I come here. You know, I need to be a little more isolated to be disciplined. And so, but anyhow, so I also didn't want to be on the water. So, anyways, I chose West Point, and then I started this career, and it was not easy. I wanted to quit every day. I thought for certain I would probably never make it through the 4 years. And because I wanted to quit every day, that really started to help frame for me my own leadership philosophy. Because one day I kind of woke up and went, if I quit, they win, right? Because it was mostly men at the academy, and most of those men did not want women there. So they were doing everything they could to run you out. And so you just kind of go through this process while they're yelling and screaming at you and telling you they're going to run you out of this man's army. And you feel their breath on, you know, kind of on your cheek. And you say, well, if I quit, which is what I really would like to do, but if I quit, they win. You know, that's not good. I'm not going to give them the edge. I'm going to dig in here. And so that kind of kept me going from that standpoint. And then I'm very patriotic, and every single day, you know, we are out there when the flag goes up. We are out there standing at attention with the sweat dripping off of us when the flag goes down. And there was something about those few moments in a 24-hour period where no matter how much I was hurting, no matter how much I was sweating, maybe how angry I was at maybe how poorly I was doing or being yelled at, Old Glory kind of gave me that sense of, no, I'm in the right place, because I'd get chills, right?
Yeah.
And it caused me to reflect on my grandfather putting up our flag every single day. And because my grandparents lived right behind us in this small town. So, you know, there's things along the way that inspire you and ignite you to keep going. And so I did graduate, and I went out, and you have a 5-year commitment. Now, I was 100% sure I would only serve 5 years. And again, it goes back to this kind of sense of duty, right? Sense of responsibility. My obligation, my contract's 5 years. It's like buying a car. I will stick to the 5 years. I will do what I'm supposed to do. But I was certain I would never stay longer. But as I got into the military and I started to lead soldiers, and you had purpose, you had a mission, you had a team, I found that I really enjoyed that. And I was proud to wear the uniform. I was humbled to wear the uniform. And so at the 5-year mark, I was like, oh, well, you know, I want to command a company, and I want to see what it feels like to be a major, you know? And so I just kept wanting to experience it a little higher, a little broader, have a little more impact. And I just stayed. And then I stayed for 27 years.
Wow. Wow. Well, you know, we're going to be talking about the 5 truths of leadership and having such a unique view of what leadership is. I've heard so many different definitions, but now having had all these experience, how do you personally define what leadership actually is?
Right. So I think that's a great question. First of all, I want to say is I don't believe that there is any textbook correct answer to that, right? I believe the definition of leadership is what you create yourself, because we all lead differently, and we all have a different set of personal core values. And I think it's very difficult to define leadership early on, you know, because you haven't maybe experienced it, studied it, or whatever enough. But it's still important to do it, because you can change it over time. And I know that I have. So in the military, we kind of cheated, right? Because the military gave us a definition of leadership. And so I used that my whole life. I never spent any time coming up with my own until I retired. And then I retired, and somebody asked me just what you did, what's your definition of leadership? And I stopped, and I was like, well, goodness, I've never quite thought about my definition. Mm-hmm. So I sat and I reflected, and I thought, what are those things that to me communicate well what I believe that this is, you know? So mine is 5 parts because I don't do anything really simple, but, and the first 4 parts I think are very, intuitive, right? So I say the first one is that leadership is the fusion of heart and mind. And when I need to give a quick answer, I just give that right there, right? That you have to have both. You have to use your heart, your mind. It's character, it's competence, it's an art and a science. But for the definition, the first part is leadership is the fusion of heart and mind. Second, in selfless action, right? Leadership is about others. Leadership is about serving. Leadership is about the led. That's number 2, in selfless action. Number 3, for the betterment of others. So you have to do things, just serve in selfless action. Why? For the betterment of others, not for the betterment of you, not to get your promotion, not to advance, but for the betterment of the people that you lead. Number 4, to effectively accomplish the mission, because we're all in this entrepreneurship, we're all in this with a vision of being successful, right? So is it a mission to raise a great family? Is it a mission to be an impact in the community? Is it a mission to run my own company? Is it all the above? And notice I use the word effectively. I didn't use the word efficiently. And the reason why is because when you use efficiently, that to me just speaks data. I'm looking at data. How are we doing? Right? Graphs. And I love data. I'm a logistician by trade. Okay. That's my expertise. So I love data. The problem is if you don't put faces on the data, then you're a manager and not a leader. Okay. In my mind. And so I don't want to be a manager. I want to be a leader. So when I put faces on the data, then I go, I have to use the word effectively, because effectively means I'm including the human dimension, and leadership is all about the human dimension. So that's the 4th part, to effectively accomplish the mission. And when I sat at my desk and I was creating this, I go, I could draw a line right there and say, done, because that's what it's about. Success, get it done, right? Get it done, as I think somebody says, right? And accomplish the mission. But then I thought, well, it shouldn't stop right there. Life shouldn't just be about being successful. Life should be about being significant. I kind of think of it should be about the Mother Teresa in me, not the name any billionaire in me, right? So I decided to add a 5th part, which says, and make a difference, right? Give to others, because there's a lot of successful people in this world who do nothing for other people. Yeah. They're doing it all for their own. So that's my long definition. It's on the back cover of my book, so it makes it easy for people to see fast.
So those are the 5 truths then.
No, that's not the 5 truths. That's just that's just the 5 parts of my definition of leadership.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. I know you want to talk about the 5 truths. I'm sorry, we only have a half hour, but when you have a definition, then you go, what your thought process is, okay, well, what's kind of the fundamental truths of leading? Because there's a whole lot of people who would never pick up a book on leadership, right? Because they go, poke me in the eye. Leadership, what a boring subject. And I'm trying to change that mentality, that leadership ought to be something every single one of us understands and wants, because we have at least one person to lead, and that's ourselves. So that made me think there are some very basic, simple truths about leadership that I think we collectively could all agree on. And so I sat and thought about those, and that's the 5 truths. And we can go through those if you want.
Gotcha. If you could separate the definition of leadership and management. I know a lot of times those things kind of blend together, especially in entrepreneurship, but how would you separate those 2?
So I because I love logistics, and that's what I did in the military. I had incredible staffs, large amounts of people who constantly analyze data, right? They're trying to predict where we're going. They're trying to assess why we had problems that we had. We called them commodity managers. And they're very good at what they do. They're experts at what they do. But I had to change them into understanding that they were also leaders. And so it's not just about managing data. And it's not even just about managing people, because you can manage people, right? We have policies, we have programs, we have training. And that, that's again, it all ends up being data. Is everybody on your team trained? Are they trained in the following things? Well, how did they score? So to me, the simple term between it is Management is really worried about or concerned about or focused on data, input, output, levels. And I wanted my managers to change their focus to be on readiness. And readiness then means, okay, we have people that are going to have to go out and actually execute, perform, and function and build relationships with the people that we serve. Either we provide them a service, or we give them a product.
Mm-hmm.
And so bringing the human dimension in to the data, right, that you recognize when you look at a data, you look at, oh, we put 3,000 trucks on the road last night in Iraq. Great. Do you realize that's 6,000 people? And so when the bullets start flying and a person gets killed or a person gets wounded, now we're bringing that human dimension into I'm looking at the data. You see, this really hit me in Iraq because somebody got up to brief me. One of my staff got up to brief me and said, last night, man, we had 3,000 trucks on the road. We had a convoy of 20 vehicles traveling on a certain route. They were hit by the enemy, so many rounds, and everything was data. And I was like, okay, just kind of slammed my desk, kind of practicing the art of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
I said, excuse me, the person that you just told me that got hit with, the vehicle got hit with an IED. It had 4 people in it. 1 person was killed. 3 people were wounded. Those people have families. Those people have a team. Their team's never going to be the same. Their family's never going to be the same. And you're not even incorporating that into your presentation and briefing to me. So from that point forward, I said, I want faces on the data, and those faces are going to go all up on the wall in my emergency operations center. And when you have an incident, you go to the wall, you look at the people that are having to now work through that. So that's really the difference, is that leadership, so we say mission first, people always. It's another way to me to define the difference between management and leadership. Mission first means we will accomplish the mission. It is a lot about data, right? Moving people, trucks, and ammo and whatever, but it's people always understanding that there's a leader out there leading it. There's a leader who put it together. There's someone who planned it. There's someone who's executing it. And there are impacts of weather, enemy, illness, etc.
Wow. And there's the heart and mind
Heart and mind.
The data plus the human element. So.
Right. The intellectual, the data piece up here, but the heart realizing, because another example, you by using both, when you're looking at your business, you get to different solutions. If you just look intellectually, you get one solution. If you just look from your heart, you get another solution. But if you use both, I suggest there's probably even a third. So one of the worst incidents that I had in Iraq happened actually before I arrived, but because the day it was my turn to be we passed the flag and I'm now the commander, I take on whatever is still kind of an open action, if you will. And there had been a convoy that got in a very huge ambush, and a soldier was killed and several were wounded. So we then go through the process of saying, okay, what went right, what went wrong, and what can we learn from this? So I owned that part of the process because I replaced the commander that was in charge when the actual incident happened. Mm-hmm. So in that process, what we learned was a fairly new unit, and they took the shortest route, thinking, look at a map, shortest route, it'll be quicker. Not looking at all the enemy activity that had been in that area 3 months ahead, 6 months ahead, a year ahead. So there were some things that they did not include in their analysis. Well, so the shortest distance between 2 points, yes, is a straight line, but it doesn't mean it's the most effective or efficient in this case. So yes, that's why effectiveness is so important, because the data can tell you one thing, but if you start using your heart as well, you'll create a different dimension to your problem solving.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, if we could touch on a little bit of a preview of your book here, these 5 truths, walk us through what that looks like and how we can start incorporating that into our business, into problem solving, and leading ourselves and our organizations.
Sure. So one of the things my friends told me was, you're writing a book on leadership. Oh, don't do that, right? So I thought, well, I should at least start the book with the question, why leadership? Like, why should you even read this book? And that's where I answer that question with the 5 simple truths. And the reason why leadership is because so the first truth is you have at least one person to lead, and that's you.
Yeah.
So that's the first part of the answer. Every single one of us have somebody to lead, and it's ourselves. And most of us are either part of a family, part of a community, part of a team, an organization, a company. And the only way to not let your team down is to make sure that you are working on you, right? That you are the standard, that you talk the talk and you walk the walk, right? And so it starts with me. And to miss that point from the beginning makes, to me, I think you have to start with that. So that to me was the first simple truth. And it helps you to envision a better version of yourself as you kind of walk yourself through that. The second truth is leadership is a choice.
Mm.
So, because you have to ask yourself, well, if we all should be leading, and I should be, why do you have people in prison, and why do you have people who cheat, and why do you have a recession with people who, were very smart but decided they try to hoard the money for themselves? Well, because they had a choice to lead, and they chose not to. It's because it's very simple. You either choose to lead yourself or choose not to lead yourself. So a lot of people, I think, when they hear, oh, you're interviewing someone from the military or a general, or I go to speak and they go, well, how hard can it be in the military? You just order everybody to do things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, no, that doesn't work. I mean, if that worked, it would be great. We would not have all the challenges that we have in the military, which you are very familiar with because you get to read about them in the newspaper, right?
Mm-hmm.
So no, you cannot. Now, I did teach leadership to a Catholic high school once in Wisconsin many years ago. And all of a sudden, all these girls are going like, oh, yes, the nuns can make you do it, right? And I'm like, you may think that, you might be intimidated by that or think that. I mean, there are rules and there are regulations. And if you're disciplined and follow them, but see, the key is you still had to make the choice to be disciplined. Mm-hmm. You still had to make the choice to follow what the nun said to you was the right thing to do. So you still have a choice in it. Okay, so that's number 2. It's pretty, but it becomes very important because when we're really struggling to choose the harder right over the easier wrong, that takes a great deal of discipline. And the only way to be disciplined is to choose it, right? To choose to do that. Number 3 is we each lead differently because we have our own unique DNA. Mm-hmm. And when I was saying, what made me think about this one is, I sit with my teammates and we have a lot of discussions and I go, wow, like I actually share many of the same values as the person sitting next to me. Yet we execute completely differently. Some better, some worse. And I'm like, why is that? And then, the old question, are leaders born or are leaders made? Yeah. I get asked that all the time. So I thought, well, I think it's tied to our DNA in some ways, right? So yes, we're all born and we're born differently because we have this unique DNA, but that's just the first stepping stone. Then you get developed. You get to watch all these other people out there, the way they make decisions, the way they respond, the way they lead themselves. And so then over time, you are developing your leader identity, right? Mm-hmm. And with the combination of choosing and the combination of having your own DNA. So for instance, I know in my DNA that humor is in my DNA, but I have listened to people speak that try humor, but they're not funny. And it doesn't come off too well, right? Yeah. It's like scratching a blackboard. So I always tell people, if you're not funny, don't use humor because it will backfire. Mm-hmm. So that kind of goes to the next one, which is you have to identify your strengths and weaknesses. That's number 4. And everybody has both. Now, sometimes I'll look at an audience and you can kind of see someone looking like, oh, weakness. Do I have a weakness? So I usually jump on that and I'll say, now, if some of you are struggling with, you can't really come up with a weakness, I said, let me help you. The very first weakness you have is you think you have none, right? So I think the reason why I put that in there is that too often we don't sit and we don't reflect about what are our true strengths and weaknesses. And I think this ties into your entrepreneurship
Yeah.
tremendously, because people want to go after sometimes what they think is going to provide them the nicest title. Oh, I want a PhD on my wall, or, I want to make a lot of money, or, I want to be in a certain sector, but that's not their strength. And I think the sooner we understand what our strength is, that's the gold mine right there. And it might not be gold mine in dollars, but it's gold mine in purpose. It's gold mine in satisfaction and feeling good about who you are. And that's the lovely piece about DNA, right?
Yeah.
Is we're all going to do it a little bit differently. And I think that's the piece about entrepreneurship,
Yeah.
So, and then the last one, the fifth one is, and I'm going brain dead. You'll have to pause that one out. Oh yeah. Just when you lead yourself better, you lead others better. Sorry. Yeah. I mean, that's just common sense, right? So the whole purpose of this drill, of these truths, is to understand that, if I lead myself first and I understand it's a choice and I use discipline, and I know that I'm going to do it differently than other people. So don't get paranoid about it. Just, play to your strengths, use what God gave you, find your role, find your purpose, find your passion, and then you have these strengths and weaknesses. You got to kind of understand what they are, because you want to develop them. You want to try to develop your weaknesses, but you may just have to accept that's a weakness. And, oh, I want to be a piano player, but that's just not going to be, this is not going to happen. Right.
Yeah.
By the way, I think some people can have strengths that become weaknesses. It's very unfortunate that some people have such wonderful natural talent. Mm-hmm. And so because of that, they think, oh, I don't have to show up on time. I don't have to go to practice. And they don't ever realize their full potential, because they had a beautiful strength, and they didn't play to it, and they didn't work on it. Yeah. And so then at the end of the day, the fifth one, just, if I keep leading myself better, I keep improving my foxhole every day, mm-hmm. I keep learning every day, living every day, then I can help you be better. And there's great purpose and satisfaction and legacy in that.
I love it. Those are amazing. I have some very specific questions. And again, as you were going through those, there are a lot of things sort of leaping out to me. I speak a lot about stewardship. That's something near and dear to me. And I created my own definition of stewardship, which is the discovery, deployment, and development of our talents and resources to serve others, right? Because for me,
right,
you find that sort of intersection, it becomes sort of a unique pathway to success, and you can create your own definition of success. But that first piece is where most people trip up, because I speak about this as an entrepreneur, but I've been a professional recruiter for 12 years. I've hired hundreds, interviewed thousands, placed many top performers, and the commonality is they had a high degree of self-awareness. So let me ask you this: when it comes to strengths, what are the best ways people can go about intentionally discovering what their strengths are?
Well, so intentionally, I think some of it is a little bit of trial and error, So again, it goes back to heart and mind. So, you in your heart, you think there's something you really want to do, you're passionate about. Mm-hmm. Okay, don't let your mind talk you out of it. Go try it, and but you have to. Deliberate is a very key word here, by the way. I'm a big believer in deliberate leadership. Deliberate means then you need to assess yourself. Okay, how did I feel about that? What was my impact? Mm-hmm. And then kind of the pros and the cons is what you hear a lot of times, but I like to use a little bit different words on that. But you really have to sit down and assess, are you as passionate as you thought you were about it? Are you, do you think that that's the right path for you? Right. So the key thing is the deliberate piece, and don't be worried about failure, and failure doesn't mean necessarily that you're on the wrong path, by the way. Yeah. It just means you might be taking the wrong steps on that path. Mm-hmm. Don't try to do it all yourself. Be willing to hear the critics. Be willing to let others also assess you. Now, that's a tough one. I think the tough part about self-assessment is people don't take the time to do it. Okay, they're uncomfortable with it. But I think a lot of people are also very uncomfortable and quite candidly don't like to hear what other people think. But I try to surround myself with people who I know will tell me the truth, right? Like, they're not worried about hurting my feelings. They probably will hurt my feelings, but they're not worried about it, right? So, because I want that, I want that rawness. I want to hear that perspective, and it's up to me to decide whether or not, you know, they're spot on or they're not, and then how do I use that to massage my way and maneuver my way on this path that I think I want to be on. So I think I mentioned to you when we had like we're chatting on the phone, I have every steno pad since 1977. Maybe I didn't mention it to you. I've been doing so many podcasts, but I have every steno pad since 1977. And in those steno pads, they're not diaries, they're not journals. They are literally records of phone calls, kind of a running list of what to do, maybe a meeting I was in, a mission that we're going to do. But I'm able to also use those steno pads in the back when I love to observe people. And I think in deliberate leadership, you need to deliberately observe people, their actions, their values, their response. And so I was always thinking, based on a mentor, you need to think two jobs out, one promotion up, 2 jobs out, 1 promotion up. So if I were a captain and you were a major, I'd be watching Julian and I'd be going like, whoa, okay, I really like how Julian did this in a meeting, a mission, whatever. And I would write down for my majors list, if I ever get to be a major, I want to do this like Julian did. And I wanted to remember it, right? So these steno pads are like just wonderful volumes of recollection when I now go through them as to that growth and that development and that deliberateness of where I needed to improve and what do I really like. When I was a young captain, I got offered to go to get my master's degree in nuclear effects engineering. Now I can't even spell that. Okay.
Yeah.
So I, but here's what happened. I got very excited. And again, this is heart and mind. You have to sometimes be careful from the applause and the attaboys and the attagirls. Don't confuse that with your strengths. Okay. Like I always tell people, when you read your rating, your performance rating, you can share that with your parents, but don't necessarily believe every word that's on there, right? Like it might not be as good as it reads, right? Because, this is how you write performance ratings or whatever. So, but anyhow, my boss informed me that my branch was interested in sending me to get my master's degree in nuclear effects engineering. And the reason why was because my first 3 years of experience was maintenance of nuclear warheads in Europe. Now, many people have done that, right? And successfully. I can still talk about it. So, but the problem was not the experience. I enjoyed the assignment. I enjoyed the work. I enjoyed that part of it. The academic piece, however, like doing the GMATs or the GRE to get in. I didn't begin to qualify to go to Colorado School of Mines or a few other schools they put out there for me. But what they said is, it's your responsibility to get accepted into the school and get the grades. And then we'll put you into this universe of nuclear defense engineering, probably get your PhD. So what happened to Becky Halstead was she's going like, oh, wow, I have a degree on the wall, master's, I have a degree on the wall, PhD, Dr. Halstead. So I started to get caught up in like status things and accomplishments. Yeah. And I was like, whoa, that's not my strength. This is not nuclear effects engineering. And certainly my strength is not going to school for it, right? Yeah. I'm a 2-0 and go girl at West Point, like barely made it through academically. I'm a much better worker than I am an academic. Sure, yeah. So that's the importance of knowing this, right? But people get caught up in what other people want from them or applaud them for, and it can quickly take them down the wrong path for them.
So what do you know to be your greatest strength, and how did you go about realizing that?
So I think my greatest strength is probably having a lot of discipline. Yeah. Now, some of my friends who know me, especially when I was a teenager, would say, discipline? Never knew when to shut. I was quite a talker, as you can probably tell. But I was an impulsive person when I was young, right? And I was a sarcastic person when I was young. So I could get in a wee bit of trouble with that. But over time, that discipline has become my number one strength. That's what's kept me in the game. That's what's kept me from quitting. That's what's kept me from, right and wrong. And I think from really focusing on trying to have a purpose in my life. So that was my greatest strength. What was the other question? I'm sorry,
You
Julian.
come to realize what that strength was.
How did I realize that was? When I got it wrong.
Okay.
You know, I mean, you learn a lot from failure.
Yeah.
You know, especially like in the wit versus sarcasm. When one day, to be funny, because I love humor, I really hurt a friend. And that was the day that I realized the difference between wit and sarcasm is humor at someone else's expense, and wit is humor at my own expense. And let me stick to my own expense. I've got more than enough baggage, you know, buck teeth as a kid, divorced. You know, I got enough material without hurting anybody else's feelings.
Yeah.
And right. So that's probably when I really realized I have to have the discipline to not say things, to not do things just because I can. You know, I tell a lot of people that, you know, just because you have the right to say or do something does not mean you should.
Yeah.
And in practicing discipline, it's helped me stay on a much better path, you know, especially with my faith, right? I mean, I was raised in a Christian home and a solid foundation of faith, but let's just face it, if I took my faith path and put it on a map, you know, it's a squiggly, it's all over, right? You have many peaks and valleys. And so yeah, I have to tell you, I think you kind of keep realizing it. It's not like one specific, I mean, that's the one I remember, but there are events in your life that you stop, you put your head on your pillow at night and you go, oh, you know what? I missed it today. You know, I missed the mark, you know, and I've been doing this for a long time, but that's why I said, prove your foxhole every day. We're going to miss it sometimes, and we got to fix it. Keep going.
Yeah. Becky, close us out with one more piece of advice. If there was one thing our viewers and listeners could do right after listening and watching this interview to start to grow themselves as leaders, what should we be doing?
Well, you know, just in our conversation today, I think maybe one of the most important things to do is sit down and say to yourself, what truly are your top 5 values? What are the top 5 things that drive you personally and professionally? Because although the truths are important, and in the book I talk about values, and the definition of leadership is important. I went a long time before I ever had a definition of leadership. I went a long time before I kind of figured out these truths and wrote about them. But my whole life has been about what values are important to me. And write those down. And it's okay to write 5 down. I tell everybody, write 5 down, put them on a 3x5 card, stick them in your pocket, your purse, your hat, or whatever. For the next 30 days, assess yourself. Am I happy with the decision I made? How did I respond in that situation? And then look at that card and go, am I living my values, or am I just telling people these are my values? Because you know, there is a mindset that, oh, you're going to want to hear that integrity is one of my top 5 values, right? Because I work for you, right? Well, guess what? Integrity is not one of my top 5 values, but discipline is. And I will tell you, the only way I can be a person of integrity is to have discipline, right? So, but you need to know what that is, and you can't just write them. You got to then assess yourself, and over the next 30 days, really figure out what those are, because it might not be the first 5 you put down. And 10 years from now, it might not be the same 5, because things in your life change and have more importance. Yeah. But I think that's the first drill I would put anybody to task on, because it will help them both personally and professionally. Are they in the right business?
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Becky, this has been absolutely incredible. Tell our listeners where they can get a copy of your book, connect with you, support everything that you're doing. Share with us all that.
Mine's really simple. We named the website Becky Halstead. So it's just, BeckyHalstead.com. I have a young website team in New Jersey that I just love. And so that we just revamped the website. It's been out there for about 10 years now. And when you go to the website, there's a picture of the book. You click on the book, it takes you to Amazon. I self-published. Amazon, I think, sells it for $16.50. I wanted it under $20 so kids in college could buy the book and a Starbucks. Yeah. But everything's on there. The website is got videos and everything else, and that's the only thing I ever lead anybody to is that, because I'm a one-person company. I'm a one-person show, and I think my website team has done a nice job of just trying to figure out a way to portray that.
Gotcha. And we'll make sure to have all your contact information in the show notes. Becky, this has been a true privilege and pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for what you do, because you said inspire. You are inspiring people, but you're going a step further. You're igniting people to action.
Thank you.
And so, thank you for doing that.
Thank you. I hope it does some good. And everyone else, thank you all for tuning in to another episode of the Pathways to Success. As always, make sure to subscribe, comment, and share. And we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Pathways to Success.